got hands.
Newly released body cam video of the moment that deputies in Florida take down a man they say just murdered his estranged wife, her dad, and one of their neighbors. The suspect then kidnapped his 4-year-old daughter. The terrifying moment as Broward County deputies saved the young girl and put her dad under arrest. But this story goes far beyond what deputies say this man did on February 16th.
Let me get to this real quick. There will be people that will lose their job over this.
The strong words from the sheriff of where he says his department fell short when it came to the history of allegations of domestic abuse inside the home, including the mother's own words months before her death about her fear that her estranged husband would kill her and her daughter. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. We have new information on a terrifying case out of South Florida from earlier this year. A man accused of killing his estranged wife, her dad, and one of their neighbors. This family had a history of domestic abuse. He also ran away with his 4-year-old daughter. I'm going to get to this new body cam video from the Broward County Sheriff's Office in just a moment, but let me remind you of what happened. On February 16th, it was around 6 o'clock in the morning that all of this took place, according to an arrest affidavit that we have read through out of Broward County, Florida. Deputies say that Nathan Gingles, at around 6 o'clock, showed up at his estranged wife's home in a community not far from Fort Lauderdale. Here's a picture of the house on Google Maps. Deputies say that he shot and killed Mary Gingles and her dad. He was living at the home. Say he was found with a coffee cup in his hand. Deputies found Mary's body at a house next door, along with the body of a man named Andrew Farron. He was Mary's neighbor. Deputies say the evidence shows it appears that Mary was running to help at another home when both she and Andrew were killed. Deputies say that surveillance video from a home shows Nathan Gingles walking away with his daughter from the home. This is a screen grab of that video that was shared with WTVJ TV in Miami. Authorities quickly put out an Amber Alert with pictures of Nathan Gingles, Mary, and their daughter, Seraphine. Hours later, law enforcement tracked Nathan's car to a Walmart after his license plate pinged on a plate reader. Here's the newly released body cam video of law enforcement making his arrest.
He's at the front passenger door. Hey, I got hands! 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 Ow! We got ow! Hey, give me cuffs! Give me cuffs! Don't you move, dude! You're gonna get shot.
I'm not resisting.
Watch out! Watch out! Oh, of course. All right. Good go. Sit your fucking ass on the ground. Hey, before we need to pat him down. Don't fucking move. Stop. Lay down, lay down. Lay down, dude. Just relax. Roll him that way. All right, he's good. He's got some stuff in here, but car keys. Hold on. Thank you. Hey, remember he had handcuff keys on his other stuff. Went through all the already? Yeah.
Hey, by the way, did you know that high blood pressure is the #1 risk factor for mortality? Nearly 1 in 2 adults have it. Many don't realize they're at risk until it's too late. It is a silent killer that often goes unnoticed. But here's the good news. You don't have to rely on Big Pharma to manage it. 120 Life is a blend of great tasting super fruit juices that's been shown to actually help lower blood pressure. It's trusted by hundreds of doctors and thousands of people who've seen real results. It's trackable too. You can use a simple blood pressure monitor to see the changes yourself, and it's completely risk-free. If you don't see the lower numbers in 2 weeks, you get your money back. So in a world where every second counts, don't let high blood pressure be the risk you never saw coming. You can go to 120life.com/onthecase, use promo code OTC for 15% off your order, or you can scan this QR code on your screen. Deputies take Gingles down. On another officer's body cam, you can hear the young girl inside the car as officers swarm her dad. The black square you can see on the screen, that is the redaction of the 4-year-old from this video.
Don't you move! Don't you move! Don't you move! Don't you move! Get on the ground! On the ground! Move! You go, you can get killed! We got him! Get your hand back! Hey, give me cuffs! Don't you move, dude! You're gonna get shit! I'm not resisting. Oh, watch out! Of course, get some. Alright, Viper 13, child secure, target in custody. Oh. Hey, before, we need a pat him down.
Can I get the March unit 56?
Don't f***ing move. Stop. Lay down, dude. Just relax. Roll him that way. All right, he's good. He's got some stuff in here, but car keys. Hold on. Thank you. Hey, remember he had handcuffs on his other.
You can hear that deputy say child in custody, and that was a major sigh of relief that this girl was okay. But her mom, her grandfather, they were killed. And quickly we learned that in this case, there were plenty of red flags that were missed, and red flags that go back long before that February morning. We pulled court records that show that Mary filed an order of protection against Nathan citing domestic violence in February 2024, and she shortly after that filed for divorce. She filed a second injunction in December 2024 and received an order of protection. That allegedly did not stop Nathan. Deputies note in the arrest affidavit that Nathan was not allowed to have contact with Mary or their daughter. In fact, in the arrest affidavit, there was a domestic violence injunction order on the table. Court records show that in February 2024, when filing for divorce, Mary alleged that Nathan dragged her up the stairs in a chokehold in front of their young daughter. Mary also alleged that Nathan called their daughter a, quote, dumb baby and showed little interest in her. In court documents, one of them handwritten and dated February 2nd, 2024, Mary detailed a night where Nathan allegedly spent the evening snorting Adderall, ran downstairs, scared the young girl, and started singing a song about how he was going to shoot and kill Mary. And perhaps the most chilling part of the dozens of pages of documents that we went through detailing this horrifying relationship was this line, where Mary claims that if nothing is done, she is afraid Nathan will kill her and her daughter. When you look at the body cam video, you can see swift action being taken by members of the Broward County Sheriff's Office, but that agency has faced a lot of questions about how they handled this case.
It is clear, based on the preliminary information I've been able to acquire so far from our investigators within the Office of Inspector General and Internal Affairs, we fell short on this one. We fell short in a response in terms of how some of the patrol personnel had documented certain facts related to calls going back to December. It's clear that some of the investigative practices conducted by detectives was also a shortfall. And so as we're continuing to gather more facts on this, I'm going to end up back in front of this camera. Make no mistake about it.
Broward County Sheriff Gregory Toney suspended 7 members of his agency for how they allegedly handled cases involving the Gingles family.
For my assessment, this is really just a shortcoming of performance, whether it be complacency, not taking a greater interest, and not doing their due diligence to make sure that they're documenting everything in an accurate manner so that when it does arrive in the investigator's hand, they have a comprehensive report that allows them to make better judgment and decisions.
In one instance, the sheriff talks about how his deputies responded to a call to the Gingles home in December.
Call in December that we had where a deputy went out to the scene and spent 35 minutes and 34 seconds, because I watched every bit of it on a body-worn camera, assessing and talking to the victim, talking to Mary, gathering information from her. And it was very robust in terms of the threat spectrum that exists, the totality of times that she had made related to, I fear that he's going to kill me, etc. And at that time, based on the evidence and things that were presented, there was enough there where we could have potentially pursued a probable cause affidavit so we can arrest him and take him off the street. And that didn't happen.
On the morning police responded to the call of shots fired at Mary Gingles' home, the arrest affidavit notes that as deputies were just arriving and setting up a perimeter, a BSO sergeant saw what appeared to be an adult white male in black clothing walking southbound with a small female child who was without shoes. But at that moment, deputies did not follow the subject. Instead, they continued to canvass the area.
And it's inexcusable that individuals fail to perform their job. And it's not an excuse within anything from administration to policies to protocols to training. It's just work by other officers. Look, I don't want the public to lose faith that we can't do this when we're handling thousands and thousands of calls per service. We were over 700,000 calls per services every year just in our law enforcement division. That is an indicator that we're going to be successful handling our cases. So to the public, to the community, to those mothers and women out there who think that we're going to drop the ball and this is a consistent pattern, know this. When we rectify this situation, I'm going to send the fear of God amongst this entire agency to make damn sure we don't do this again. Because this death is on my watch.
This is video of Gingles in court. He's pleaded not guilty to charges, including 3 counts of murder, and he's being held without bond. This video per WPLG TV, and we've learned the state is pursuing the death penalty. Joining us now to talk more about this case is crime victims rights advocate Elizabeth Parker. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. I know we talked about this case when it first happened. Now we have this body cam video. Just first off, what was your reaction when you watched Nathan Gingles be put under arrest?
I thought the Broward County Sheriff's Office SWAT team did an amazing job, not only locating him in such a fast way, but the way that they placed him under arrest safely where no one else was harmed, and they were able to extricate the young child without any problems and safely. I thought they did an excellent job, and it was good to see that and how they all came together in such a fast way.
Yeah, and there's so many questions for the sheriff's office, and we'll talk about that in just a moment about the way that they handled this case leading up to February 16th. But in the body cam video, I noticed just how quickly you hear that young girl in the beginning of one of the officers' deputies' body cam videos, and then you don't see her because they were so quickly getting her out of there. It was very impressive. As this case has gone forward, he's pleaded not guilty to these charges. What are some of the things that you're seeing when you look at the court documents of how this case is progressing, the evidence that the state will have against Nathan Gingles going forward?
I think this is an interesting case in that when I looked at the state's initial discovery disclosure, which is basically they list everything or every item that they have in their possession that they're going to or they intend to use in the case. And most oftentimes prosecutors disclose everything, even if they don't intend to use it at trial, just so that the other side is on notice of every item of evidence that they have. But here, the discovery exhibit is 31 pages, and it is full of body camera video after Ring doorbell camera video, audio. There is so much technical evidence, which oftentimes we don't see. I just was amazed at how much footage that they have in this particular case. So it will be interesting to see that utilized in a trial, if this case does in fact go to trial, where you have really a firsthand view of what was going on in terms of the search, in terms of prior contacts, potentially, if that's going to be used with Mr. Gingles, what these officers saw as they came into these crime scenes, because that's what's captured on body camera video, and it's very emotional, it's very moving, it's very it basically transports the jury to that time and place, and it's a whole new way of presenting these cases. So I think that's going to be interesting. I also did notice that on March, I believe it was the 13th, the state attorney's office filed their notice of intent to seek the death penalty against Nathan Gingles. And what basically that means is, obviously they're seeking the death penalty, but the state has to put the defendant on notice of the aggravating factors that they're going to be relying upon to seek the death penalty. There has to be aggravating factors above and beyond of just the killing. And here, one of them is that the factor that the homicide was committed in a especially heinous, atrocious, and cruel way. That it was committed, another factor is that it was committed during the course of a kidnapping. So while he was committing another felony, the kidnapping of the child, which he did not have any custodial rights to at that moment in time, because the court had issued a no contact order or an injunction against him, that because he committed the homicide while a kidnapping was occurring, that's another aggravating factor. Also, the fact that he was under an injunction for protection, meaning he was not allowed to have any contact with Mary Gingles in this particular case, and he committed the homicide while he was violating that court order, that's another aggravating factor. So the way that the law works in Florida is that you have a jury of 12 people in a capital murder case, which is what this is, and that all 12 of those jurors have to have a unanimous verdict in terms of whether or not they find an aggravating circumstance. So all 12 have to agree, for instance, that the homicide was committed in a heinous and atrocious or cruel manner, or that the homicide occurred while he was kidnapping the daughter. And if all 12 of them come to an agreement on one of those aggravating factors, then you move to the next stage, whether or not the jury wants to give the death penalty or they want to give life in prison, because that's the only two options that they have. And that does not need to be unanimous. That needs to be with all 12. It needs to be unanimous with 8 jurors only. So it will be interesting to see how many of these aggravating factors will be relied upon and proven in court. And then the jury has to weigh the aggravating factors against the mitigating factors that Mr. Gingles' lawyers may present to the jury.
Is this the same jury that would find him guilty in his initial trial, or is that a new jury once you reach the death penalty phase?
It should be the same jury, although if something were to happen, there is a unique provision in the law where the judge can bring in a whole different jury for the death penalty phase. But I can't think of a time where I've seen that actually happen. The judge always picks alternate jurors that sit and listen to all of the testimony in what we call the guilt phase of the trial. In the event something happens to one or more of the jurors, there is the ability for one of those alternate jurors to step in so that it doesn't disrupt the deliberations, and they can move to what we call the penalty phase without, seamlessly, without interruption. So typically it always is the same jury that hears the guilt phase of the case.
When you look back at the case of the Gingles and the calls that were made, the domestic violence petitions and documents that were filed that you can see on the Broward County clerk's website, And you deal with cases of domestic violence often, and sometimes they're not black and white. And hindsight is always 20/20, and certainly we have hindsight in this case. But how obvious should it have been? Should it have been obvious to deputies over the course of the last year plus that this home, it should have been more than just a piece of paper that said that Nathan Gingles couldn't go near his wife and his child?
You know, I think the Broward sheriff came out, and I commend him for admitting that mistakes were made, for admitting that it was very obvious that things were missed, that his guns, that Nathan Gingles' gun should have been taken from him. We knew from the previous restraining order or injunction, in Florida they refer to it as an injunction. We know from the previous injunction for protection that he did have many, many weapons that were surrendered that first time around that were missed the second time around. So I think that it was pretty clear that the behavior was escalating, that Nathan was dangerous, and that she and her daughter were both in danger. Mary and her daughter were both in danger. And in fact, it's chilling to see that 10 days prior to this murder, she writes that she knows that he's going to kill her, that his intent is to kill her. And she's begging for help and begging for assistance from the court and from law enforcement. And unfortunately, they failed her.
Yeah, and I know the sheriff in this news conference we'll talk about in just a moment talked about a December incident where deputies responded. He said that he actually said it was a pretty thorough meeting that the deputy had at the home, that he watched every bit of the body-worn camera, and that there was enough, in his opinion, that there could have been an arrest that was made to take Nathan Gingles out of the home, and it didn't happen. Being in South Florida, which is where you're located, for Sheriff Tony, what did you make of his comments? I mean, to say, very bluntly that what he saw, the way that his agency handled this case was BS and piss poor. I mean, those are pretty strong words from someone in charge of a law enforcement agency for people that work under him.
He's a no-nonsense kind of guy. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that he wasn't so concerned with the liability for his agency in terms of, if they failed, if they didn't follow proper protocol, if they didn't follow proper procedure. He wasn't concerned at all with any potential civil liability on his agency. What he wanted to do was admit that they were wrong, admit they made mistakes. He even is investigating and potentially punishing many of those investigators that were involved in these prior incidents. And he wants it to be a lesson for his agency to do this better, to handle these cases of domestic violence, these investigations, these cases where these victims are in serious trouble. Look for these identifying incidents. And I think he's going to not only help make things better in Broward County at the Broward Sheriff's Office, but across the country, because there's lessons to be learned in every one of these cases, unfortunately, and serious lessons that can be learned from this situation. So I commend him for doing that.
And it'll be interesting if we ever get to see that body cam video from the December meeting, what that deputy was told, what made the sheriff believe that an arrest could have been made that night. But it's not, to your point, this isn't the first time that we've seen an incident like this where there are these red flags, and then you get to a point like what Nathan Gingles is accused of doing, shooting and killing his estranged wife and her dad and a neighbor, and then kidnapping the girl, and then looking back and saying, why didn't you do something about it? But we've seen in cases where you'll watch this body-worn camera. I think about different situation in some ways, but Gabby Petito, Brian Laundrie, there's that body cam video that was released, and everybody is looking at it, knowing what happened down the line and saying, why didn't you do something? In your experience, typically, what are the mistakes that law enforcement make in those moments where something could be done, but it just doesn't happen?
Well, here I think one of the biggest mistakes is that there wasn't a risk protection order requested, or knowing that he had all of these weapons previously. and the seriousness of the allegations, especially under the December 30th. I think it was December 30th, where he tells the police officers he doesn't have any guns. Well, I mean, this is someone who's stalking, somebody who's made threats to kill, somebody who's put a tracker on her car. I mean, look at the history between these two parties. Is he one to be believed? I mean, does he have a motive to lie to the police? Of course. So unless you've turned over every stone and made sure that he doesn't have any weapons, I think that was one of the biggest mistakes that is made. Now, we do know that in a lot of these cases, the piece of paper, unfortunately, the injunction for protection or the restraining order isn't going to protect the victim. So oftentimes we need to look at these cases in a different light and see, is there probable cause? Is there the ability to arrest this person and keep the victim safe? Because even if he did turn over all those weapons that he had, doesn't mean that he couldn't get a weapon on the street. He couldn't go purchase a new weapon, underground. Now, if he had an injunction against him, he couldn't go in and legally purchase one, but that's not in and of itself going to stop a perpetrator. But putting them in jail, restricting their freedom, restricting their ability to contact and to come into contact with a victim, that's where we can make a difference. So I think looking at these cases in a different light, in a more serious view, looking at the totality of the circumstances is important moving forward.
I think about the young girl, Seraphine Elizabeth, and to think of what she went through, how just terrifying that those moments were like for her. And I read that her aunt is reportedly trying to get custody of her. But from what you've seen of the system in Florida, what type of resources are there for a 4-year-old girl that went through this?
It's tough, but it does seem like the system is working in her favor. It sounds like the aunt wants to take her and is fighting very hard through the court system, which would be the best case scenario, to have her with a family member, not to have her with her father's family members, but to have her with her mother's family member in a loving home. And I think the system is geared towards wanting to reunite the child with a loving family member. And so I'm hoping that'll work in the favor of Seraphina.
Yeah, and it's just it's a terrifying story. You talk about if this moves forward to a death penalty phase, we're not even at the point where there's a trial as of yet. What type of timeline, if this happened on February 16th, are we looking at eventually getting to the point that there's a decision made, if he's found guilty, of whether or not he would be put to death for what happened on that day?
Well, given the amount of evidence that I've seen in the first disclosure from the state attorney's office, I think that it's going to take several years before this case gets to trial. In Florida, we have a very unique system in the criminal justice system where depositions are allowed to be taken of every key witness that the state intends to call at trial. So depositions are that process takes a very long time. And I haven't seen the witness list, but just seeing the amount of evidence that there is, I can imagine it's, probably upwards of 50 to 100 witnesses that the state has listed. So the defense has every right to present a defense. And I know the judge will be pushing the case, but you never want to do that at the risk of violating the constitutional rights of the defendant, because the defendant always has a right to present a defense and to exhaust every remedy, every motion, everything available to them, especially in a case where the death penalty is on the table. So the judge is going to be very cautious about pushing the defense too quickly to trial. And I think the state understands that they also need to be assisting in giving the defendant his due process rights. So I think 3 years is not unreasonable before this case goes to trial.
Wow. I mean, and to your point too, you think of the discovery evidence and just the list of, and the videos and how visual this trial could be if and when it gets to that point. Crime victim rights advocate Elizabeth Parker, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Very difficult story here, but we appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
For On the Case, presented by Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.